And we are live on the PHU Dynasty podcast. This is your 2024 Toronto Battle Axes team review, led by the great GM Andrew Scavelli. Fresh off a championship a couple years ago, in an interesting spot this year. I'm here back with my normal co-host here, Sean O'Shea. Sean, are you ready to talk Battle Axes football?
I'm ready to shit on a team.
Oh no, here we go. So this team did rank eighth in the Dynabook lines, if you will, the initial lines of the season, kind of in the same range as a few other teams. This team just so happened to bring up the eighth spot in James's Dynabook initial rankings. So without further ado, we're gonna get into some of the quick facts here. So this team did finish third in the regular season last year at a 9-5 number. Fifth in points was 1692, but did play the third easiest schedule this year with 1636. So maybe some of those wins are a little bit of a product of an easier schedule, but still a 9-5 finish, not bad at all in this league. Wins and losses since 2018, Scavelli has been the best team since 2018 with a 54-27 record. Despite having the second least or ninth most transactions overall since 2018. So he's at 166 transactions, but clearly they've been, solid moves overall that have gotten his team to where they need to go. So 2 championship wins since the league's inception, one in 2015, and then a couple years ago in 2022, led by a couple of really great running backs and a great running back core. But ever since then, Sean, I feel like this team has been kind of trending in the downward trajectory, whether it'd be not really from a win-loss standpoint, but more from a roster standpoint. So I guess give me your quick overall thoughts on where the Battle Axes stand.
It just feels like the bill is just starting to become due. I mean, a lot of contention for a few years in a row. Like eventually it catches up to you if you're just keep building for now. So like we'll get more into the roster, but like even like future assets, he's only got a first round pick in 26 and then no first round or second round picks outside of that. So it's gonna be a tough couple of years unless there's like some major rebuilding happening.
It's funny because like I know there's no cap in this league, but it feels like he's like limited on cap space, if that makes sense. Like it's like
he's the New Orleans Saints of.
That's kind of where I was going with this. It's like, okay, we have a lot of guys. He kind of even reminds me a little bit of where the Bucks were at a couple of years ago with a lot of older players.
Mm-hmm.
And then, we had to punt some of that cap space down the road and maybe take a couple of shots on cheap veterans like a Russell Wilson and a Baker Mayfield, if you will. So anyway, let's speaking of quarterbacks, let's get right into it with Russell Wilson, Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, Will Levis, Justin Fields, and Sam Howell. So 6 quarterbacks in this room currently. One, surefire, I guess. I guess I shouldn't even call him surefire. Russell Wilson's no longer surefire. He used to be, but
that's not who I thought.
Veteran.
Okay.
Yes, he could be fired, some sort of fire. But he did, have a big piece in fantasy history, and he seems like he'll give you the starter for the Steelers week 1. So I feel like he's probably the shoe-in for the Battle Axes here, as a QB1 out of this list. However, there are quite a few young players that have some upside. Not dead in the water here at the quarterback position, Sean. So, let's combine Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, I think, at this point, because they both play for the Steelers. Give me your thoughts on the quarterback.
I think I got most of that. You're doing a robot voice for a lot of the tangent, so
not ideal.
I think you're still a little frozen on my end, but I think I heard we're combining Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, and I think that's fair. I mean, I would expect, unless Russell Wilson is horrific, I think he's going to keep the starting job, and Justin Fields is going to get a chance to just kind of learn the offense behind him and then come in as injury replacement outside of that. So for me, I don't even have Fields ranked this year, and I just have Wilson, and I have him as like a bottom third quarterback this year.
Yeah, so I mean, like just in general, I'm looking at Wilson as kind of in that QB, like 15 to 20 something range on a week to week basis. I feel like his running game I think he's a little past his prime for the running upside maybe at this point, and he's still going to scramble and be effective athletically, but I don't think you're going to get the prime vintage Russell Wilson 400-500 yards rushing or whatever, and that doesn't help in fantasy, of course.
Yeah, I think Peyton got a lot out of him last year because I think he was like quarterback like 12 or 13 last year. I
Yeah, I
think
can look it up. He
so.
was 14.
14. Okay, so
26 touchdowns, 8 picks,
yep.
341 yards on the ground. So that's kind of on par actually for most of his career lately.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't see him topping that. Honestly, I'm like going into Pittsburgh. I think it's a better team around him. I think the offensive line is going to be really good. He's got
Way better.
one proven receiver. I like Fryermuth that we talked about him in the last pod. But I don't know. I think this team is probably going to be one of the run heaviest teams in the NFL, and I just don't know if there's going to be the touchdown upside for him this season.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I do think they got a ton of upgrades at the offensive line position, so it can't be worse than what it was the last couple of years in Denver, where he took 55 sacks and 45 sacks. And I think too, like with Wilson, I think we have to look at the Battle Axes team as a whole and like where this team is trying to get to. We posted a poll, or I posted a poll earlier today asking like, what should the Battle Axes do? And I think that is a valid question. And if you're trying to compete with the current roster, is Russell Wilson enough as your quote starter to win a championship in this league? I mean, obviously we have, some young upside that maybe has that chance to explode and, maybe get them to that, playoff caliber team. However, there's a lot of question marks, and Russell's really the only one without a question mark, if you will. So do you think that this roster can win with Russell Wilson?
No.
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 But
so just real quick, we had 2 votes for blow it up,
I was
3
one of
votes for current roster, and then 2 votes for move around assets and soft rebuild. So only
the assets, like there's just not a lot to move around.
I mean, it's literally just the running backs. I mean, that's kind of it.
I mean, we'll get to them, but like how much are you going to get for a 30-year-old running back and then a running back that's had a lot of injuries? It was good, really good.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I would be very hesitant to buy either of those guys. So, but we can keep talking about the quarterbacks though for now.
Yeah, so let's continue with Jayden Daniels being next up on the list. Very, I guess, polarizing prospect during the draft cycle, just on exactly what he is going to be. I mean, he had a huge last year at LSU, and frankly, it's hard to deny the numbers, but he did throw quite a bit of, heave and hoe offense, lots of long passes, lots of scrambling, not a lot of second reads. And frankly, he's not very big. So I think we've talked extensively on how we are concerned about his injury potential. That being said, for this team at the time, I think it was 2-4. Caleb Williams goes right ahead of him. It made a lot of sense considering there really wasn't a true number 2 on this team. I guess Will Levis at the time was the number 2 on this team, which is not ideal.
Yeah.
I think you did need to take a shot on a quarterback, so I don't fault Scavelli at all for taking, Daniels right there at 2-4. That was probably the right value, considering his rushing upside too. So where do we see Daniels this year? I mean, it's a rookie year. He has a reasonable surrounding cast. Scary Terry is a good quality player. They picked up a good tight end in the draft, Sanat. They still have Jahan Dotson. So, like, what do you think of Daniels as a rookie?
He's got to be the quarterback that has the widest range to me as far as like what could happen this year. Because if if I wake up in like December and you tell me he's like quarterback 5 on the year so far, like I'm not going to be shocked just because of the running upside. But like if I wake up in December and he is on IR for the rest of the year, I will be less of surprised than the other way. So, and
I
like
mean,
there's also just the chance that like he's not good. I mean, that's also, it's a third option, but like I just find it really hard to believe that he can withstand 17 games in the NFL with the way he plays, which is that's one of the reasons I kept knocking him when we were talking about like the draft and doing the mock and stuff like that. So I mean, he's his best chance of contending for a playoff spot for me personally, just because like I mean, I've had Lamar Jackson for the past 5 seasons, 6 seasons, and like he has carried me in some games, and Jaden Daniels has the same upside, so totally see it.
yeah, I mean he can run. I mean the long and short of it is you got to imagine the Commanders, coaching staff and front office. They have got to be coaching all offseason to protect him. I mean, there's whether it be sliding, throwing the ball away, just whatever it takes to keep this guy healthy. Because I mean, if you don't have him, you're back to Mariota. Don't love that. I mean, is there any chance at this point that Daniels does not start week 1? He has to be the week 1 starter, right?
100%.
Yeah.
Mariota was the backup for the Eagles last year. That guy, I don't even know how he's on a roster.
He was so bad for the Falcons a couple of years ago.
Side note: have you been watching the Hard Knocks off season with the Giants?
I certainly have. I've been really enjoying it too. I like
Did
it
you
better
watch
than the
them-
actual Hard Knocks.
Me too. You saw the second episode with
I
them
did.
interviewing all of like the prospects and stuff.
Yeah, I thought the Daniels one was interesting to say the least.
I don't know if I would have loved that answer. Like, what do you like? All right, so what do you think? Like, what do you think about this play? He's like, throw a touchdown, and the table's like, all right.
I mean,
Like,
it's kind of a fun answer. It's like, all
yeah,
right.
but I feel like if you don't know the right answer, give the confident answer. Is kind of the vibe I got from that.
Well, it seemed like he too, like out of all the other quarterbacks, he had the slowest recall.
Yeah, like
which
when
is
they
kind of
pushed
concerning.
him, when they put him back to back with Drake May, I was like, oh.
I mean,
shit.
like Caleb too was like shredding. Like
Yeah.
it looked like they were going like triple the speed. So
Mhm.
I mean, there's definitely some. I feel like from a dynasty content perspective, the Hard Knocks has got to be one of the best. Like this offseason Hard Knocks has to be one of the best things ever released.
I wish there was footage of them negotiating with Daniels and Saquon from the year before.
I know it seems like that
fast-forwarding to
Saquon
now.
franchising was a disaster. So
Oh yeah, dude! Like you can tell on the phone. Sorry, we're gonna come back to Steve in a second, but you could tell like in the phone call at the end of that episode, like Saquon's like, "Fuck this shit, I'm out of here."
it sounded like I have 0% chance of coming back without telling. They were all as professional as you could be in the situation. It seemed like.
Yeah.
I mean, I still find it interesting that Shane is acting like he's been hamstrung by this. Oh, he's like, oh, this Daniel Jones contract. It's like, bro, you gave it to him.
You paid him.
It's like this is your like he's acting like it's like somebody else's problem. Like he's inherited it. It's like no, bro. Like this is your thing. He's a dead man walking. It feels like.
Yeah, I honestly, seriously, like he should be on the hot seat, not Dable.
I still think Dable's a good coach, man. Like I
do too.
I do think Dable might be a better OC than a head coach, though.
It's very true, but like I don't know what you could have expected from him last year with Daniel Jones getting hurt. You're playing fucking Tommy DeVito and like third string offensive lineman. Like,
well, that's what they were saying. They said that in the Dolphins game they were playing 3 practice squad offensive linemen. Like that just can't.
Yeah, nobody
would do anything with that, let alone
watch Patrick Mahomes try and win a Super Bowl with that, and he like the best player in the world couldn't do anything. So
no, they were getting smoked the whole time. So anywho, let's get back to the battle axes here. Bo Nix is next up on the list, another draft pick for the battle axes this year. Seems like he's in a battle with Stidham. Have a gut feeling it's going to be Nix probably at the end of the day, being the opening day starter.
I'm like 99% confidence it'll be Nix.
Yeah, so I mean, like, I feel like Nix has got to be one of the, bottom 6-ish quarterbacks, going into the year.
I said him at his 31.
Okay, so. There you go. So that's pretty rough. That's pretty rough.
But I will say, like, as a fun betting prop, like I like him as the like offensive rookie of the year long shot in this class.
I
I
mean,
think
I
he's
gotta
going to
be honest with
start.
you, like as tricky as it is, like and how polarizing as a prospect that he is, like that this dude, I remember watching him at Auburn and he was terrible. Like absolutely awful. And he got better every single year. Now, granted, it's been a slow, incline up to where he ended up getting a first round draft pick. But like he actually like did get better every year. So like there is a world where this pick doesn't look that bad.
Yeah, 6
And
years later.
yeah, I mean it took him a while to get there. Like it's a
But
24-year-old
I mean,
rookie, but
that's Daniels too. Daniels old prospect too.
I think
So I
Burrow
think
was an older prospect as well. So I mean, like
yeah,
it's not unheard of.
yeah,
But
and
I'm not gonna bet on it. I don't think though. I'm a little
yeah,
scared.
like my logic is that is like I feel like Peyton got the most he possibly could have out of Russell Wilson last year, and I think Bo Nix is probably going to come in as just a better overall passer than Wilson, like coming in,
Man,
just because like
kind of wild.
he can actually like throw to the middle of the field. Like he wasn't just dumping off to running backs and throw and praying on deep balls, which is
I mean, the Cortland
like
Sutton got all that last year.
and half of those touchdowns were miracles that he caught them. So
Yeah, all the jump balls basically.
mhm.
So I mean, I feel like Nick's could be a spot starter this year, depending on
Yeah,
what kind of matchups are going on.
I
But I feel
mean
like the next guy on
that's
the
all four
list,
of these guys for
yeah,
me.
I mean Levis. I still think Levis has a good amount of upside here. His highs are extremely high, and his lows are like high school football bad. So like, I mean, they've definitely surrounded him with the weapons. I feel like that he needs to like prove if this is actually legit or not this year. Kind of like what the Titans have done this offseason, to be honest, other than like the Calvin Ridley big money signing. I feel like that was a little unnecessary perhaps, but I do like the fact that they have an idea of what they want this offense to look like, which it feels like for years the Titans offense was always kind of like a mystery box. Like we just never really, I mean, it was clearly just Derrick Henry and just whatever else. And this year, we get a little bit more speed on the offensive side of the ball, get some bigger name receivers in here now, and actually give the quarterback a chance to like truly prove himself. So they also upgraded their offensive line. They should be significantly better there too. So, I mean, this is a do or die year for Levis, I think. And
Yeah, you're gonna find out real quick.
so, I mean, if it hits hard kind of a thing. And Scavelli is in the sure why not boat. So I feel like this is a good guy to have as your QB 4-3, something like that this year, just to see what you got.
Yeah,
And
it's
then the next,
definitely.
yeah, sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say it's like a super like hodgepodge in Tennessee to me because like Levis is like he's like a under center play action kind of quarterback and he's under Brian Callahan who played a lot of shotgun in Cincinnati and like the receivers are kind of a mishmash of like all of those styles. So I'm really curious to see like what ends up like happening there.
I mean, like
Go
Levis
which
has that
way.
rocket arm, and I don't feel like any of these guys are like good downfield threats anymore. Like I feel like, I mean, like Calvin Ridley has speed clearly, but like him, Hopkins, Boyd, like none of these guys are like really fun downfield threats, and I don't know how well that meshes with like a rocket arm like Levis, but I guess
I
we'll find
mean,
out.
Hopkins can get loose downfield just based off of like route running and like I don't know,
Yeah, he
pushing.
can find a way, I guess. Yeah,
But
he's just getting old.
I, I don't know. Like it's so hard to like get complete deep balls in the NFL nowadays because everybody's playing like shell or cover two or quarters like a ton of the time. So
Yeah, I mean they're usually contested at this point.
mhm.
So these next two guys, we talked about Fields. We could talk about Howell like briefly. I mean, there's a chance that Howell ends up, maybe coming in as if a Smith injury happens, maybe a longer term plan perhaps down the line, but could be a cut candidate probably here for the Battle Axis with how many folks are already in the room at quarterback. But
Yeah, it's what I've got him at. I've got him cut candidate. I like Howell. I think he's gonna have like
I think
he'll
we've
have
both been
another
on the
moment.
Howell bandwagon for a couple
Yeah,
of years
he'll have
now.
a moment at some point, like as like a relief guy. But there's zero chance he's gonna just take over for Geno Smith unless he gets hurt. So
No, I just feel like he's a Drew Lock type at this point, where it's like, all right, let's see. Maybe he'll get another shot one day, but for right now, he's just a backup. So, quarterback room, like, what grade would you give a quarterback room? Like, if we were given a school grade,
a C.
I was gonna say a C, something around there. Maybe a C plus just for like young upside, maybe.
I would
But
be not surprised at all if like we look back at the end of the year and we're like, yeah, this is like a B to B plus.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
if Daniels hits and then maybe one of these other guys hits, then we're
But he
looking a
could
lot
definitely
better.
be drafting another quarterback next year or like the year after, too.
Yeah, I
So
mean, it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I feel like Scavelli is known to draft quarterbacks later on in the process too. So you always re-roll the dice, right? So all right, so let's go next. This is probably the best room on this team, the running back room. Um, really, like tight end maybe,
yeah, that's what I was thinking.
like
But
maybe I don't know. I still think there's talent here.
I
Um,
mean, it's a more important position. So yes.
and they're older. I mean, I get that for sure. So, but that's the theme of this team, really. We got a lot of older folks, the elderly care home. Starting off at the top, obviously Eagles fan here, Saquon Barkley. Coming off a down year, basically with the Giants, it's everybody kind of expected that to some sort of extent. He's just you can't ask him to do that much in that offense with that bad of a line. He also was hurt for a couple of weeks early on in the year. Finished the year with 962 yards and 6 touchdowns, 3.8 yards a carry. Sean, terrible. 41 catches for just 280 yards. So like there was just no room for him to work with. The speed in the game is too talent. I mean, I was blown away by this. This is already his 6th year in the league, Sean, which
Yep.
is like, I still can't believe that. Like, I feel like he's only been in the league like 4 or 5 years, but 6, and this is gonna be his 7th year. So
Got like 800 more career carries than Raheem Mostert.
that is pretty wild. Pretty wild. He did somehow with all the shitty numbers. He finished RB13. He was 6th the year before, where he had a really good season in 2022 during that playoff run. But Sean, now he goes to a team, much better team, much better offensive line, much better weapons around him. I feel like it should be better, assuming there's no injury. I saw one of the craziest stats I've ever seen on Twitter today, and while you're giving your thoughts, I'll look it up again because it was startling. I think, actually, I remember off the top of my head, it was he had only 8 career carries in 6 seasons where the team was leading in the fourth quarter at the end of in the last 7 minutes of the game. 8, which is like I think I don't want to mess up the stat, but it was something like that, and I was like, holy crap!
Did he miss a lot of time 2 years ago when they made the playoffs?
That's a good question. Let me go back and look. And I see he played 16 games.
Wow. You know what? They played a lot of close games that year. They did a lot of bullshit that year. I forgot because they played a really easy schedule and they snaked out so many wins. But no, I can talk about Barkley. First of all, it's one of the crimes of my lifetime that him and Kelsey aren't going to get a chance to play together because that would have been
sick.
Electric. Oh my god, just Kelsey kicking out for a Saquon outside zone. Oh.
Everybody loves.
I would watch highlights of that nonstop. But I mean, even still, it's going to be a good run game. It's going to be the best run game he's ever been a part of. And I think I fall more on the line that I think there's going to be less sneaks this year with Hurts because they're paying a running back like $16 million per year. Roseman's not going to do that unless he's going to use the shit out of that guy. So I think he's going to get a lot of goal line carries.
I mean, without the centerpiece of the tush push, I also believe that you'll see quite a downtick in overall rushing touchdowns for Jalen Hurts this year. I don't think you're going to get. I think he had 17 last year or something like that. I don't see that happening again. Also was actually a little bit of a piece of why I took Caleb Williams at 2-3 because I do feel like the rushing touchdowns and points for fantasy will go down. Not to say that he's dead in the water or anything, but I think he'll have less. So I liked it.
I've got him at 11 rushing touchdowns this year,
and that seems fair. I mean, clearly coming down from last year.
2 years ago, Miles Sanders had 10, even with the tush push going on. So, and frankly, Barkley's just not even it's a complete different tier of running back. So,
right. I still think Barkley. I mean, Where do you think he's going to go in a redraft league at this point? A
I
second round?
I mean, I mean, I haven't running back 6 this season redraft.
Okay. And in our
Like,
league, you know,
in our league, I think that's a mid to late first round pick, depending on how aggressive everybody gets with running backs, which for our league is usually pretty high. So I could see him going anywhere between like 1.8 to 1.10, I think.
1/8 to 1. Yeah, that seems about right to me.
Which, I mean, it's Saquon. The name looks good at the end of the first round.
He sure does. All right, so here it is, Sean. I was a little off on my numbers. Saquon Barkley has run the ball a grand total of 19 times in his entire 6-year career in the fourth quarter with a lead of 8 points or more. Philadelphia running backs have received 109 carries up 8 or more in the last 2 years alone. So, like, if the game scripts are the same, Barkley will be getting more touches and more quality touches than ever before. And I think he's being drafted around, QB 10 or whatever in redrafts at this point. He's 8 to 10, something like that. So, I mean, dude, this guy could really pop off again. He's only 27. He's not. I mean, the only downside with Barkley is the injuries. I really think that's kind of the only thing I'm scared of at this point. So, and he's definitely Scavelli's most tradable asset at this point. Now the question is if he goes that route or not. But maybe mid-season he thinks otherwise. But
I would agree. I think there's another guy that he could look at on his team that makes the most sense to trade, but we'll get to that in a little bit.
Sure.
But Derrick Henry?
Derrick Henry is next on the list.
Stud.
The consummate Raven. I mean, truly, like if there's ever been a back that I'm more excited to see in a Ravens jersey, it's Henry's got to be my number one of all time. Like, he's going to look so awesome in that jersey. He's going to get lots of goal line touches. I mean, Gus Edwards, I mean, he's literally like a souped up Gus Edwards, right? Like, at this point, you can't imagine he doesn't get anything less than what Edwards got last year as far as like goal line touches.
I have him projected for 14 and it feels low.
Which is crazy to say. But I kind of
low. But it feels crazy to go higher than that in like a projection.
I mean, I feel like his ultimate floor is like 10. Like I can't imagine he doesn't get more than 10.
If he's getting 10, he's missing games to me.
Which is so wild to think about because it's so hard to project running back touchdowns these years.
Because Lamar doesn't really score a lot of rushing touchdowns. I think his high for a season is like 4 or 5. So it's not like Lamar is going to be vulturing him or like stealing him, which I always get pissed at because there are so many more touchdowns that Lamar should have. But
yeah, Lamar's first couple of years he had 7, and then
did he? Okay.
The last 3 though he's had 2, 3, 5.
Yeah.
So really nothing.
There hasn't been a lot lately.
Not as many as you would think.
And it didn't look like there was a lot of design runs for him in within like the 5 or 10 yard line last year. So I think it's just gonna be Derrick Henry all day. Like, there's no other running backs in this team that are gonna like sniff the red zone to me.
No, I mean, even with like a Keaton Mitchell coming off that big injury for his ACL, I mean, he's not a goal line back whatsoever. The only other backs on this roster are Rasheen Ali and Justice Hill. I don't see either one of those doing anything on this point this year unless injuries happen.
Yeah, Ali might not even start the year healthy. He tore his bicep at the combine. So
yeah, they said that he participated in some of the minicamp drills, but realistically, he's probably not going to be back till at least training camp. So
yeah, I think it's just going to be Henry and Justice Hill to start the year.
Pretty wild. And Patrick Ricard, watch out for Patrick Ricard.
6th offensive lineman, Patrick Ricard.
He's a ball player. So anywho, I mean, with Henry, as good of an RB2 as you could probably have in this league, honestly, I feel like it's a pretty solid RB2.
I still have him as an RB1. So
I mean, yes, but for this team though,
yeah.
And considering, he is an older player to still have this level of opportunity. Scavelli won the offseason, no doubt about it, as far as free agency goes. Like, all the players that he needed kind of went to the right spots, especially in the running back room here. Yeah, 4 changes of scenery, and they all kind of worked out for the most part. Maybe outside of Pollard, like maybe because he's going to have split a little bit more touches, but he had such a bad year last year that just getting any touches, like substantial 50%, workload is good for him, I think. So I'm on board with that. So let's go to Pollard then. Goes to Tennessee, ends up in a split with Tyjae Spears, who had a pretty solid rookie year. Pollard definitely skidded last year in terms of being the guy for the Cowboys. Did not have nearly the same efficiency that he did when he was splitting with Zeke. But that was a little bit expected, I think. But I don't think anybody expected 3.9 yards per carry. I think there was a little bit more hope that he could be more of a slasher in the mold of like an Arian Foster kind of guy and make more happen. That being said, the Cowboys' running game really wasn't all that good last year. I don't think they're going to be good again this year. But he is a good pass catcher, and I feel good about him. I just don't feel great about him this year, and I think that's okay, considering where he slots in on Scavelli's team. How do you view Pollard this season?
Yeah, it works out that these are the first two teams we're talking about because we talked about Spears on the last episode. So, like I said before, like I feel like it's such a pure 50-50 split. I think I have them both like low end RB3s just because of how much they're gonna like steal from each other. So I like him as a flex. I think he was a lot more like whether you like PFF or success rate or whatever, like the second half of his year, even though it wasn't statistically amazing, was a lot more promising than the first half. And given he was coming off of a broken leg from like January of the previous year, like that makes sense. So I would still be optimistic about Pollard, and I wouldn't be surprised if he outpaced his like current like wherever he's going in drafts.
Yeah, I just think he's like a solid option with limited upside. I guess if Spears does go down, that upside certainly turns
Either one of them, yeah,
quite
like
around. I mean, either one could be an RB1 at some point, depending on how it works. But next guy on the list, Aaron Jones, goes over from the Packers to division rival Minnesota. Going to be playing in a pretty good offense overall with skill position players. They have lots of talent with Hawkinson, with Justin Jefferson, Addison. New quarterbacks, though, it's going to be a Sam Darnold versus McCarthy situation. But you have to imagine they're going to lean on the run game quite a bit. His only real competition is Chandler. So I like him.
I don't think they're going to lean on the run game at all.
Not even a little bit.
They were the second highest team in neutral pass rate in the NFL last year. I don't think they're going to change their offense that much. I think that's why Darnold's going to start the year.
I mean, that is true. I mean, if they are going to kind of just leave everything as is, then and not really work around the quarterback talent, then sure. And they didn't really do it last year. I mean, they had played Dobbs for a good chunk of the year. I mean, it wasn't like they say, hey, we're going to turn into a run team all of a sudden. So I see that for sure. But I mean, I feel good about Jones. However, he is a little older. Has been banged up quite a bit, which is scary. But he's been very efficient pretty much all the way up until last year too. Every time he's been healthy and has gotten touches. So I think he'll be solid, but maybe not ultra dependable. But that's been the story for his whole career though. So
yeah, you're gonna love the weeks that he actually starts, and then you're gonna have to figure out the rest.
Yeah, it's gonna be
because he's definitely very talented. Like he's gonna get you points when he starts. So I got him as an easy flex start every week.
And I think he'll be a fun player to watch overall. I feel like this offense will be an interesting watch, especially early in the year, to find out like what this quarterback play looks like. And I just think O'Connell's a good coach too. So I think it'll be
such an interesting team this year. Like I have no idea. Like if they win like 6 games, I wouldn't be like surprised just because it's a tough division. But like they could like win like 10 games and I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah, they can mix it up. They could find a way. It wouldn't totally surprise me. So anywho, let's go down to the number 5. And Frank, let's talk about the drop off here, Sean. I mean, it's a big cliff after Aaron Jones and Pollard, down to Bucky Irving, who I mean, when I was making this list, I was kind of trying to slot like where I would, put these guys maybe on a depth chart. And, Bucky Irving is probably going to be the RB2 in Tampa. I don't think Jamal Williams is going to be much of a thing this year. He was awful last season. I think he barely even got 3 yards a carry.
Outside of Irving, I have everybody else as a cut candidate on this team.
Yeah, I mean, like Williams, he'd be a tough hold at this point. Like, I mean, Miller is definitely going to get more of an opportunity this year. Kamara's still there. He can't be anything more than RB3 on that team for me. So it's not really. He's still there, sadly. I just don't like. I would have Frank Gore ahead of him, honestly, at this point. Like, which is kind of weird to even say. But
I put Gore as a cut candidate, but like you're going to keep him because he's a rookie coming in. So
yeah, and this team is just kind of desperate for that like next level of talent. So at the running back position, so I mean, Leonard Fournette literally doesn't even have a team at this point. So I don't think he's getting signed until mid-season or not at all at this point.
There was a sleeper update today that he said he was going to be signing with the team soon.
Interesting. I wonder who would sign him. He seems like a good fit with like the Chargers, but like a really run-heavy power football team that loves veterans that are always hurt. It kind of makes sense. So I guess let's talk about Irving because he's kind of like the only true like RB2 left here. I think he's a quality running back. I've said on the podcast a couple different times. Like I think he is a very solid in between the tackles runner for his size. He does not do as much on third down as you might expect for a small running back. That being said, I think he's a very good player to have with White. I feel like White is getting better at his in between the run, tackle running, but the line was so bad last year on the interior. It's hard to really tell if he was any good or not. I feel like this will be a much better season for him with Barton at the center position, not Hainsey. So I feel pretty good about White again this year, but he can't take that level of abuse again. I don't see it. And I think they have to spell him with somebody, and that somebody's Irving. So I feel decent about him.
I mean, just like from like tape of both of them coming into the league, I think Irving might be like, I think he's a better in between tackles runner than White was.
He literally is. Yeah.
So but he's not so much more talented or anything that he's going to like be pulling away a lot from White unless it's just to spell him. So
no,
and I've got him as a young upside player. Like I have him outside of my top 50 running backs. So it's not somebody that you're going to want to start with any enthusiasm unless White gets hurt.
I mean, if White gets hurt, this becomes a lot more interesting, though. I mean,
for sure.
There's no like it's Chase Edmonds that we're talking about, so it's not.
Yeah, it's not great.
There is no like quality veteran even on this roster right now. So, I don't know. It's an interesting one if something happens with an injury, but realistically, like you said, these other 4 guys really all cut candidates. They could be cut. They could not be cut. We'll see. Scavelli's team is a very interesting and unique build with the overall roster positions. And we'll see that right here with our wide receiver position, the shortest wide receiver list of the bunch so far in these team reviews. And Sean, it's not very good. I'll be honest with you. A few years ago, if you said, hey, this is 2018 or whatever, I'd feel way more excited about this room. I do not feel good about it right now. And I think this is the reason, a few folks are saying hey, let's rebuild, because I don't think this is a playoff level wide receiver roster. And I definitely don't think this is a championship level wide receiver roster at this point. Give me your initial thoughts on the wide receiver room before we get into the players.
Bleak comes to mind. I don't have anybody like the highest guy I have is 40.
And is that Diggs?
No.
Is it Watson?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't feel good about Watson either, because that receiver core is just who the hell knows what's going to happen there.
That's true.
Yeah, I do need to relook at Diggs because he probably doesn't need to be a bit higher, but like I think he's the 3rd best wide receiver on that team, and I just don't. Like, I can only project so many passing yards for a quarterback before it seems unrealistic to like project that.
Right.
And I think I've already got Stroud at like 4,500 yards. So
pretty. I don't know how much more you can put in that, but I totally agree with you.
like I'm pretty sure I've got Stroud at like 4,500 and like 33 passing touchdowns. Like that's aggressive
That's
for a
big money.
projection for a second year quarterback. So you're roboting out again. Oh
I,
no.
I can see my connection thing. I really want to get a wired connection here. Hear me at
Yeah.
all?
You're coming back a little bit.
All right. Let's see how I can let me know if it's trash. We'll start off with I like stuff with Watson because I feel like he's a young upside guy. How about you talk about Watson?
Yeah, I'll talk about Watson. So he was definitely the guy when he was healthy last year for the Packers. That's kind of like why I think I have him as the number one receiver as far as like my rankings go, because they want to get him involved. Like he's definitely he's the best athlete on that team. I think that's a pretty easy call. So I think they're going to use him. It's just a matter of like whether you trust. Like it's like with Aaron Jones when we're talking about the running backs. Like it's going to be good while you have him, but I just like week 3 hamstring is like incoming. It feels like to me. So and we'll see. And it's another thing like projecting like these guys like you can only project so many yards for Jordan Love. Like and they use all of their people. They've got 4, maybe 5 wide receivers that are usable, 2 tight ends, a couple running backs, like, and they're all going to play. So we'll see.
And I think I'm better now.
Mhm.
So with Watson too, like you said, like there's so many mouths to feed. It is really hard to kind of pinpoint one player on each week. But at the same time, I do feel like when he was hot, in those stretches, it was pretty impressive, and he definitely turned me around because I was kind of a hater early on as well, and I wasn't feeling it as much. But he definitely, had those breakout, few. I think it was like 4 or 5 weeks where it's like, oh my gosh. So like, it's not to say that he can't just be the guy, and maybe the offense changes, where they do go with a more, consistent number one, if you will. But I'm not betting on it. I don't think so. That's
I,
scary.
I don't think there's anybody that's needed less receptions like to score touchdowns in the last 2 years than Watson. So like he delivers on his targets. Like I think he was scoring a touchdown like every like 7 or 8 catches the last 2 years.
That's pretty wild.
So I don't have that in front of me. I could be a little off, but it's close.
Let's see. Christian Watson stats. It's crazy that this is only his 3rd year. I feel like he's been in the league a lot longer. Last year, he had 28 catches for 422 yards. He only played 9 games. The year before that, he only played 14 games. I'm going to look up his game logs from last year. He's opened up week 4. He's inactive for the first 3 weeks. 25 yards and a touchdown, 91 yards, 27 yards, 33 yards. So like a whole lot of nothing. And then week 10, 2 catches, 21 yards, a touchdown, 5 catches, 94 yards, and a touchdown.
So I got the career. It's 12 touchdowns on 69 career catches.
That was wild.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
So is he actually that efficient, or is that like is that just some? Is that coming for him? Like, is that going to go lower this year? Who knows? Right?
It is hard to know, and that's kind of like, for Scavelli's team, not ideal. You don't really like the idea of having your best young player be kind of a question mark on a week to week basis. It's a struggle. Next on the list, we got Mike Williams. I mean, he's in an interesting spot. I mean, he should be the number 2 guy for Aaron Rodgers this year. That being said, he's always hurt too.
Yep.
He's never really been able to stay healthy his entire career. And Rodgers' health, I mean, obviously we expect him to be good again and back to full strength, but that's always a question mark at age 40 or whatever. So, I mean, I don't think there's any threat though for his job. So that's the positive here, I think, Sean.
I think the best case scenario is like some sort of like James Jones season that he had with Rodgers way back when, where it's not a lot of catches, not a lot of yards, but the dude scores like 10 touchdowns on like just a bunch of just back shoulder fades and back shoulder like darts, which that's a good fit for Rodgers. He's got a wide body, like big guy. He's going to catch the ball. It's just a matter of how many games he's going to play, which feels like is starting to become a theme with Scavelli's team.
Yeah, I mean, it was an ACL injury in his defense, and that's kind of like a freakier injury. And he did play well for the first 3 games of the year before he got hurt. He had a 13 target, 8 catch game for 83 yards, and then the game that he got hurt, he played against Minnesota, had 8 catches for 121 and a touchdown. So it's not like he can't play. He's still a quality receiver, and he is kind of a perfect complement, that downfield, go up and get it role to Wilson. So, I mean, if he gets 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns, that's pretty big success, right? Like, I would think.
I would be shocked if he had 1,000 yards, even if he played the entire year.
I mean, he's only had 1,000 yards twice in his entire 7-year career. So
I just don't think it's going to be his role on the team. I think Wilson's going to have 170 targets in this offense. To me,
he's going to be wild.
Mike Williams, I feel like is going to be.
He's going to be the Devontae Adams of this team. Is Wilson? Like, he's going to get every over the middle catch will be him.
It'll be every catch. Like, I think he's going to probably. If he doesn't lead the league in targets, it's going to be like him or Lamb. It's going to be one of those two.
A stud as well. All right, so let's go to the next guy on the list here. Adam Thielen, facing lots more competition than he had last year. James and I talked about it a little bit over the weekend when he was here with the Deontay Johnson discussion from last week. I mean, obviously Johnson comes in. He figures to be the slot at number 1 kind of right out the gate based on what they gave him and just the overall build of the team. He feels like the number 1. And then they also bring in Xavier Legette in the first round of the draft, who I feel like is probably just going to end up being like a big slot kind of guy to start his career. And then probably Thielen on the other side. So I think it's going to be a lot more competition. Really, his whole game last year for fantasy was just a stupid amount of targets early on in the season. I don't see that happening again. I don't think he's going to be a startable asset a lot of the time. That's just my opinion on Thielen. Do you feel the same way?
I do. I've got him second in targets on the team, but like it's a wide margin between him and Deontay to me.
Yeah, let me look at his numbers from last year. Yeah, I mean, he started off very hot. He had, how many targets did he have? Jesus, total. It's not showing up for me, but he had 14 targets, 8 targets, 3 targets, 11 targets. He finished the year with 137 targets. His yards per target, though, only 7.4. So not ideal. His yards per catch only 8 or 9.4.
He's an old man, Eric. He can only run so far.
I mean, he's 33. I mean, like, there's only so much you can do. I mean, I feel like frankly, he's probably the better fit as like that old man slot guy, at this point, as opposed to an outside guy. Maybe that's kind of the route they take him and put Legette on the other side.
I think they're going to force Legette into whatever's going to make him successful. Just knowing Canales, like, I think he makes good decisions. He doesn't do stupid things. So I think Thielen at least knows what he's doing on the outside. So I think he's going to end up on the outside, and I think Deontay's going to end up on the other end with Thielen in the slot. But that's just how I'm feeling about it. And I like I said, I think everything is just going to go through Deontay Johnson because he's one of the best separators in the NFL. Like, he's not one of the best.
What they needed the most. They just need guys.
They need so bad. So I think that's just going to instantly, I think Bryce Young's just going to instantly lock onto that. And I think he's going to, I've got him at like 140 targets this year. So.
I mean, if Thielen could get 137 last year, then Deontay could absolutely get 140 this year.
Yeah, I think the offense will be a bit better. I don't think it's going to be – I don't think it'll be a top 20 offense, but it'll be better than the –
I just don't think it can get worse, Sean.
Yeah.
I don't think it can get worse.
Agreed. The defense will be worse, but –
I mean, just from a fantasy perspective, though, like, Scavelli is going to be forced to start him at some points of the season, I feel like, just based on overall talent on this roster, which is kind of scary. Let's go to the next guy, Curtis Samuel. I think he's on the Bills now, and the Bills are just a weird wide receiver room at this point. I mean, we're talking about Chase Claypool at times. It's so strange. I do think this is interesting from a standpoint of he's a bit of a redundant asset with Khalil Shakir. And I don't know how they will manage their personnel. Like, I don't know if it's going to end up being, I mean, you would have to imagine Keon Coleman's going to start on one of the outside spots. And then you'd have to imagine Shakir or Curtis Samuel will take that slot role. But also, too, Dalton Kincaid is flexed out a lot. I'm not really sure how this offense or this receiver room is going to look. I do feel like Shakir's probably a better bet on the outside than Samuel at this point. So I think we could probably like pencil in Samuel as the slot guy. But even then, from a fantasy perspective, do you think he's going to have any startable value this year?
I have him, I believe, as the highest ranked receiver on this team in fantasy this year.
I mean, he finished last season with 91 targets, 62 catches, 613 yards, and 4 touchdowns, which has basically been his entire career. He's pretty much done that his entire career.
Yeah, it's a relatively tight grouping between Samuel Coleman and Shakir for me, but I do have him as the top guy. But I mean, it's not great. Like, the way I see this offense running this year is just going to be, if it's man, Josh runs for his life, or they run duo, or they're running gap, or they're going to throw it to Kincaid on his matchup, like one-on-one. And then if it's zone, I think it's like Coleman's good against zone. I think the other guys are all, like, because they're slot type players, I think they're all going to be solid against zone. And I think those are going to be the games that they're going to be better in. But the last time Samuel played in a Brady offense, he had 40 carries that year too. So who knows?
That's interesting to mention that, because I didn't really think about that till I just saw it just now.
Like,
there, I guess.
After Brady took over last year, like he had Kincaid in the backfield a little bit. Like, he was doing some weird shit. So it'll be interesting to see. Like, I think everybody's going to be like a role player, and like all of the stats are really just going to go through Josh.
Yeah, I mean, we all know he's the centerpiece of this offense. Rushing touchdowns, passing touchdowns, he does it all. I mean, it's just a matter of how they distribute the ball, and I don't know how that's going to look quite yet, but I have a feeling that Coleman is going to have a good year. Like, I just truly believe that. I mean, he's a polarizing prospect, top to bottom, but there's just something about him. I just feel like he's going to hit, and he might not be like 1,000 yards hit, but like a 700-yard year is not out of the question for him.
I even before the Travis injury last year for Florida State, I didn't think their offense was very good. It wasn't a very downfield offense at all. So it's tough to project him that way.
I mean, the only time they were ever going downfield, it was just a jump ball for them. Like that, there was no, and it wasn't even like
it wasn't
50-yard bombs. It's like a 22-yard pass. Like, it was a weird, like you said, very weird offense. All right, so let's go to our next guy on the list, Odell Beckham. I mean,
I have him as a cut candidate.
He's playing for Miami. I think it's over. I think it's time to move on. Probably, I agree. Cut candidate.
Wide receiver 91 this year.
That's not ideal. Not ideal, great. Sean.
Not great.
Next guy on the list doesn't even have a team. He finished 127 last year. Wide receiver 127. Played all 17 games, and I'm kind of surprised that he doesn't have a team at this point. I feel like he at least is a depth receiver, like a quality depth receiver. But I mean, from a fantasy perspective, he's a cut at this point. Luke McCaffrey is probably the next interesting name on the list here. Seems like as of right now, he is going to have a pretty good shot to get one of the top 3 spots on this team. I feel like he's probably the front runner for the 3rd spot. It just depends, because he's more of an outside guy. And I feel like if they want to play him, he'll probably need to be on the outside, and they'll probably have to move Dotson or McLaurin into the slot to make that work. But realistically, there is no competition for him to be at least a wide receiver 3 in this offense.
I think he's going to be the starting slot receiver on this team.
There you go. So if you think he's the slot, then even
he's
better.
He's going to play the big slot, like Cooper Kupp style role on that team, just because he's smart. Like he'll know his routes. He's a former quarterback, so I he's one of the ones that I think like might actually work out. He's going to be the wide receiver 3 on a team that's probably not going to throw for over 3,500 yards this season. So he's not a guy that I think is going to be startable this year, but definitely a guy that should be kept on roster for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Dotson's going to be coming up on a contract year next year. I mean, I feel like there's a good chance
Cardio king last year.
him and Alec Pierce were both just smoking the cardio. I'm not a giant fan of either at this point. So I think McCaffrey's a good, solid like hold for this team that just needs any young players at the receiver position. So I like that. And then next guy, Johnny Wilson. I haven't heard anything out of him from like camp or anything.
I actually think he has a decent shot to be an outside receiver when they've got 3 on the field, and they'll just move Devontae into the slot or AJ in the slot. But I could see them having him on the outside. He's had a good camp.
I mean, realistically, if you look at their depth chart, they don't really have a good option on the outside of AJ Brown and Devonta Smith. Like there is no other like guy with his level of size and speed.
They went with outliers because they took him and they took Aeneas Smith.
And I like Aeneas Smith too. Yeah, I like both of those guys. Like I thought both were quality candidates.
He'll be the rookie draft this year.
And that would be a great spot for him, like to show that he's got some juice. I mean,
what a year to get drafted too. Damn.
Yeah, seriously, it's crazy. But I mean, here's the deal: like Johnny Wilson, I think he's better than what a lot of people were saying pre-draft. Like I think he's a quality receiver. His hands are trash, but to me, he's basically like an at-price Kelvin Benjamin, like where Kelvin Benjamin should have been in terms of like this is what he is. And that's okay when you're taking him. I think they took him in the 6th round or something, like 185. Okay, so like he's exactly what they need on the outside as a backup. And you know, I would have a hard time cutting him if I was Scavelli because I mean, one injury to one of those outside guys, and you might have a decent, flexible player at that point in that offense. So I can't imagine he would cut Wilson, but I could.
He only needs to cut 8 players, and I've got 13 cuttable players, and Wilson isn't one of them.
There you go. Perfect. But our next guy, Russell Gage, absolutely is cuttable.
Oh, I can't believe he's still on the team now.
I think he's just a team locker room kind of guy.
Well, you should cut him right now while we're doing the podcast. A live cut.
A live cut would be a first.
It'd be great.
It would be a first. I might even run a live cut when it's my team review. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I only have 1 cut left to do, so I might.
We could do a live cut on yours too. Let's make live cuts a thing. That would be fun.
Let me break the rules and pick up 3 people illegally, and I'll drop them for my episode.
I'll see a couple of guys onto your team so you can cut them.
There we go. All right, perfect.
We need more live trades. We need more live cuts. We need more podcast-driven roster moves.
We'll swap 4th round picks, and you just send me 3 of your cut guys, and we'll.
Hey, hold on a second. I ain't swapping no picks on this roster. On this podcast, we're not swapping picks. That's for Justin and Alex.
I'll give you the more favorable of the 4th round picks at 3 years from now. It'll be like an NBA draft trade.
And in the 2030 draft, I can't even understand that stuff. All right, let's go to the tight end room. One of the better rooms here. Much better than the receiver room. Obviously, George Kittle, the star of the show here. I think this is his age 30 season, which isn't like ancient for tight ends. Like they're starting to, be quality tight ends all the way up to about like 33, 34 at this point. So, Kittle finished tight end 2 last 2 years in a row. So nothing much to scoff about there. This was his first 1,000-yard season since 2019. So there's that. On less catches too. So in 2019, he had 107 targets, 85 catches, and then 90 targets and 65 catches last year. So he's more efficient last year. 6 touchdowns, which was his 2nd most in his career. And he had kind of battled injuries most of last year. He mentioned, I was looking at this Roto World blurb here. San Francisco tight end George Kittle is rehabbing a fractured rib, issues with his shoulder and toe, and a core muscle injury this offseason. So he had all kinds of shit going on, and he still had 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns. So I feel good about Kittle this year. I feel even better if somehow Ayuk is off the team. I think
he's trying.
It's certainly there's no doubt he's trying, Sean. But there's a lot going on here with Kittle, but I also think he's just a rock solid, top 5 tight end in fantasy like he's always been. Do you have any disagreements there? I mean, we have the wait, hold on. We have the live cut. It happened. Russell Gage has been cut by Scavelli 1 minute ago, live on the podcast. There he goes. It was a hell of a run.
Love to see
it. He finished wide receiver 58 in 2022, and then a wide receiver 1,004. He didn't play a game, but he's got a tryout from New Orleans, though. Hold on a second. He's got a tryout from New Orleans. Bring him back.
We just sandbag Scavelli. One of us picks him up right away.
That would be, oh my God, what if Alex? That'd be hilarious.
That's just fantasy bullying at that point if you did that to somebody.
Oh my goodness. I do love a live cut, though. It's one of my favorites.
Right. He's a man of the people. I appreciate it.
Scavelli gives the people what they want, and that's admirable for sure. So I love that. Anywho, yeah, back to Kittle. He's going to be good, right?
Slight disagree. I'm a tight end 6, but I mean,
really. All right. So why 6? Is it just because other folks are coming up now? Is that kind of?
It was a good class last year, and
it was. Yeah,
I mean, I've got Kelsey, Kincaid, I've got McBride, Laporta. Is that 4 or 5? I can just go to my tight end page and not.
I mean, that certainly works too. I mean, there's only one other one that we're not thinking of. It's 5.
Oh, Andrews.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, like here's the deal though with Kelsey or Kittle, it's always injury related mostly. I mean, if he can stay healthy, which he managed to do last year, then he's probably going to be in the top 5. I'd never really like to bet on his health. That's the only thing. I mean, he's missed games at all points of his career. And I feel like there's always a chance. Hold on, we have a live roster move on. What's going on here? There's a flurry of activity now. Alex Morales picks up Lynn Bowden. He's back.
For the vibes.
He's back. And he cut Sam Darnold, starting quarterback Sam Darnold. What is happening?
Scavelli, pick up Darnold. Do it.
I mean, that's the obvious choice.
Another fringe,
waivers just so you pick him up.
Top 30 quarterback on the roster.
Why is Lynn? Oh, it's because Lynn Bowden's a meme though for how many times he's been dropped.
Yeah. Well, he's got to keep up with Michael Pittman now. So
all right, I'm gonna quickly count this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 19, 20, 21, 22,
oh, Jesus Christ.
24 transactions for Lynn Bowden. 24. He has not been picked up or dropped since 2022. So
he took a year off. It's fine.
He just needed a year off. He's back.
I was gonna say something about Kittle. Oh yeah, like the good thing. What I love about what makes him unique is he's like, for me, he's got like 30 less targets in my projections than like any of these other tight ends in this range. But like, he doesn't need the volume that these other guys need because he just rips off these big plays.
Dude, he's athletic as fuck, and that offense just always gives you space. Like, it's just the way the offense is designed.
The most efficient offense ever, every year. It's crazy.
I forgot that in 2018 he had a year, 136 targets, only 88 were catches, 1,300 yards and 5 touchdowns, and he was second to Travis Kelce that year.
Stupid. Yeah.
That was a dumb year.
I mean, like Brock Purdy's touchdown rate the last 2 years is like 7.9 and like 7.2, which
stupid.
If anybody doesn't know this, like the average is 4.5.
It's not high, no.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's no coincidence because the last 3 seasons have been Kittle's highest touchdown seasons. But in previous years, the 4 previous years, he had 14 touchdowns in his first 4 years in the league. And then over the last 3, he's had 22. So clearly a difference at the quarterback position there from a red zone perspective. So he's going to start for Scavelli. And I think you could argue that Evan Ingram might sneak into the starting lineup quite a bit this year.
The
as
next
a flex
2
guy.
guys might start in the flex spots.
Yeah, I mean, Ingram, he had a really good year last year, man. You know, I've always been a supporter of Evan Ingram. He clearly he was a blowout for a long time. Never quite reached his potential in New York. Kind of just always in that 600 yards and 5 touchdowns kind of range. Banged up a lot. But the last 2 seasons for Jacksonville, he's never missed a game. He's finished as tight end 6 both years. 4 touchdowns each of the years. And then this past year was his career high with 963 yards, 114 catches, 143 targets for Evan Ingram last year. So
didn't he have,
pretty
didn't he
well.
have like 14 or 15 of them in week 18 last year?
That's a wonderful question. He had 13 targets in week 18 for 79 and a touchdown. Funny that you mentioned that because literally the last 3 out of the last 5 games he had over 12 targets. So
yeah, they were just trying to get him the record. So like he's a quality player, but I think that like the volume is going to come just a bit down this year.
It has to.
With Kirk coming back, you add a rookie wide receiver, you sign Gabe Davis. Like I'm pretty sure I have Trevor Lawrence as the passing yards leader this year. I think.
Wow.
It's him or Mahomes. But
that's pretty wild.
I think Lawrence is going to throw for a lot of yards this year. So
now here's a question for you.
Yes.
Would Evan Ingram, if you made him a receiver, because he is a receiver at the end of the day, he's really not much of a tight end. On Scavelli's roster, what depth chart position would you put him? Would he be like wide receiver 4, 3?
Hold. I can tell you this.
Because he once again, he finished with 963 yards and 4 touchdowns. The year before that, he had 766 yards and 4 touchdowns.
So I've got him for 113.
This is how we can decide if he's a flexible player or not.
113 would be right where I've got Curtis Samuel, or right ahead of Curtis Samuel. So I guess I would start him ahead of Curtis Samuel.
I mean, I think I agree with that. So you're talking about wide receiver.
I've got him scoring the same amount of points as Tyler Lockett this season, actually.
And Lockett would be a wide receiver 3 on Scavelli's team, at least.
Yeah.
So, I mean, very interesting. So, I mean, I feel like we're going to see a lot of him, a lot of Kittle, obviously, and then maybe even a little bit of David Njoku, in here as well. I mean, I know you were saying that you were interested, but let's see.
I think he could start him in the flex. He
was great at the end of last year.
He did all of his damage with Joe Flacco. Like
dude, he was cooking at the end of last year.
If you look at the splits with Njoku with and without Flacco, and then look at the splits with Amari Cooper with and without Deshaun Watson, it is wild last year.
Like, I truly forgot that he was tight end 5 for the year, which is absurd. But you are so right. I mean, literally from week 14, he had 6 catches, 91 yards, 2 touchdowns. Week 15, 10 catches, 104 yards, a touchdown. Week 16, 44 yards and a touchdown. And then week 17, 6 catches for 134, no touchdown. So but basically it was double digits every single week from 14 to 17. And he was a stud. And he was being used, frankly, how he should have been used his whole entire career. Get this. He's a receiver. Just get him the ball.
And he did that and almost burned his face off last year, like halfway through.
Correct. You're absolutely right.
Honestly amazing.
I mean, truthfully,
they're not going to use him because Deshaun Watson doesn't use his hands.
It is absurd. I mean, and at the end of the day, I think they have a new offensive coordinator. I think it's Ken Dorsey.
It is.
So that I don't think he ever really used tight ends too prolifically.
Yeah, and I mean, realistically, Stefanski's the offensive. He's the offensive coordinator.
He's the guy. I mean, he's calling the plays anyway.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, is he on the tight end 1 map? To me, he's not.
I've got him at 11.
I mean, I've seen everything from 6 to 12 or whatever. So I mean,
yeah, he had such a good year last year at the end of the year that I feel like they're gonna try and keep him involved, but I just don't trust Watson like whatsoever to throw to him.
No, and unfortunately for Scavelli, like, I thought Njoku actually would have been an interesting trade candidate for a team like Tibbs's before the big Mark Andrews trade recently. Just to try to get some sort of assets, for a player that probably won't be in your starting roster, that has some younger-ish upside. He felt like a tradable asset, but there's just not enough teams that need a guy like David Njoku anymore. I mean, literally James might be the only one. at the tight end position at this point. So I don't think even he's much of a tradable option at this point either. So he's kind of just going to be a quality depth guy at a position that he's already pretty strong at. So the next two guys on the list, I mean, pretty cuttable, right?
I mean, unless he wants to keep a Logan Thomas as like a handcuff for George Kittle, but
I mean, he's a team mascot at this point. The thing is, I like Logan Thomas. I've
Me
always
too.
liked him.
Yeah,
He's
quality player.
But I just don't see a role for him at all unless there's a Kittle injury. But they also drafted Cameron Latu last year, somewhat high, and he figures to be in the mix too as a tight end too. So I can't imagine that he's going to be like a super useful option at all.
Especially with like the top three guys, I have both of the last two as just cut candidates. So
yeah. So we'll move on here to the special teams, which frankly is one of the centerpieces of this team on a yearly basis.
Holy shit! I didn't even put down Brandon Aubrey. I forgot.
That's a big one. He can't. I mean, he's the number one kicker last year.
He's got 9 cuts to make now, not 8.
Yikes. Yeah, between Butker, Moody, and Aubrey, he has 3 of the top scoring offenses in the league.
He's just hogging all the good kickers. What is this bullshit?
I mean, maybe those are the tradable assets. Who's going to trade for a kicker? Has anybody traded for a kicker before?
I really love misogyny, so I could trade for Harrison Butker.
I mean, hey, if that's your thing, he could be available. You never know. Yeah. I mean, he had so basically kicker number 5 last year was Butker. Moody was number 20.
He scored so many points. Did he get hurt?
No.
Did he just only kick extra points?
It's a lot of extra points. He only made 21 field goals. So, I mean, but then Aubrey
kicked the fucking piss out of the ball last year.
He made 36 field goals.
How many 50-yarders did he kick last year?
He had 10.
Jesus Christ.
So half of his field goals were 50-yarders. That would have been half of Moody's, which is crazy.
Wild. Wow.
So, yeah, very wild. But anyway, all that to say is I think probably get rid of one of these, one of these.
Get rid of Moody. Like, who needs them, right?
I mean, just get rid of them, pick up a young asset, see what happens. But more importantly, this is the 6th defense team in our league. And he's got the Jets, the Broncos, the Bucks, the Bengals. I put the Chargers, but it should be the Chargers. It must have autocorrected or something. And then Saints. A couple of good ones sprinkled in there. Obviously, the Jets have had a good defense for quite a while.
Yeah, I mean, I've got the Broncos, Saints, Bengals, and Chargers all bottom half to bottom third defenses. I would keep the Chargers, though, just because, like, Harbaugh always has good defenses eventually on his team, so I'd keep him. I'd keep the Jets, the Bucks, and the Chargers if I were in Scavelli's shoes.
But here's the thing is I don't think Scavelli's cutting any of them. I think he's going to keep all of them. And then he's just going to cut some of the schlubs from earlier on in the list. So
if he was an actual Bucks fan, I would probably cut the Saints, but
yeah, just to not have to look at New Orleans' logo on your page, perhaps. All right, so let's go to our next thing. This is the projected starters. I have it pretty much like what we've mentioned pretty much this whole way. I put Evan Ingram in the flex at that last spot. But Sean, this is your opportunity to give me word. What do you think this team finishes at from a win-loss perspective? And do they make the playoffs? I think is kind of the question for this team.
No.
So there's your answer for the no playoffs.
I think he finishes. I think he's finishing 10th.
Finishing dead last.
And I give him 3 wins.
This is a 3-win team, according to Sean O'Shea. You've heard it here first. Now, here's the thing: is if there's one injury, this whole season is over. Basically, I mean, there is not enough depth at all on this team. To me, in this league where everybody is deep if you're in the playoffs and you're making a deep run, you have quality backups, and this team, frankly, just does not have it. I mean, as we've gone through the list, the deepest room truly is probably running back, which is kind of weird because they only have 4 real options at this point that are legit. I mean, I guess quarterback could be deeper per se. I mean, even tight end could be deeper. But the thing is, realistically, like the running back room is kind of like, from a top end talent perspective, is like the stronghold of the team. And if a Saquon goes down or a Henry goes down, I don't see any way this team makes the playoffs with the current roster. I think our poll earlier where we said, hey, what should the Battle Axes do? I think if this team sustains an injury early in the year, or maybe is just not performing as we get closer to the trade deadline, I think that's when you might have to start thinking about, okay, let's move on from some of these guys and try to get some assets, because like you mentioned earlier in the podcast, before we started, this team doesn't have a lot of assets either. Does he have any other first round other than 26? Does he have his 27 still? He has. I think he does.
I think so. I don't know. Has anybody traded their 27 first yet?
I think Alex traded his 27 fourth with Dustin. So yeah. That's it. I think that's the only one I've seen so far.
I'm sure Alex is trying to give it away at this point, but I don't know.
It wouldn't surprise me. But I mean, I just don't see there's just not a lot of hope for this year as far as like depth. And I don't see any new depth coming in. I think, I mean, we mentioned earlier on the podcast too, Scavelli has been 9th in the league in transactions. I feel like this year he's got to be scouring this waiver wire to try to find any sort of, breakout guys. I feel like this is the year, if he is going to get more active with a lesser roster, this is his chance to really make his team better, is going to be through free agency this year. And like you said, if he's towards the bottom of the standings, he's going to have higher waiver priority and maybe can make that work. And trust me, Scavelli is one of the best managers that we've seen in our league, in multiple leagues. So I'm not putting it past him to outperform or overachieve what I think. But I just think, like you said, I think the bill is coming due, and this receiver room just isn't it anymore. And realistically, this team always had quality receivers that were veterans for what seems like the last 3-4 years. And now they're finally starting to show that sign of age. And it's not fun for him, I'm sure.
Yeah. But I'm not like going in for like a character assassination on Scavelli. Like, he's doing a great job. He wins so much, especially in redraft.
He's the best team in the league from a standing perspective.
But like, the crux of this team is the top 2 running backs who are 27 and 30, and like, it's tough. Like, that's a scary way to play.
And then even that, like, just outside of the wide receivers, you got Diggs is 30. Christian Watson's very volatile from a week-to-week perspective. Mike Williams is hurt a lot. There's just so many question marks. And listen, don't get me wrong. It's very possible that all the question marks just don't have, like, it just works out. And Scavelli, like, just like his free agency did pretty much. Because, I mean, like, literally, if this team had a bad free agency, I couldn't possibly put him anywhere near the playoffs. Like, if Barkley went to, a bad team or something like that, or Henry kind of ended up going to a split backfield or something, I couldn't put them in the playoffs. I mean, this roster right here, as we're looking at it, is the only chance I could see for a playoff berth. Is if everything works out, there's no injuries, because there's just no depth on this team, Sean. There's not.
And there's not a lot of like players with a lot of, like, the young upside on the team is Bucky Irving, Johnny Wilson, Luke McCaffrey, and I think that's it.
Those are 3rd round, 4th round rookie draft picks.
Quarterbacks, they're younger. So
yes, let me say that too. Like, to go back to the quarterbacks, like, there is some young upside at quarterback, so that gives me some hope. But the position players outside of that, I just don't feel strongly about any of these guys. And like, they're all 3rd and 4th round rookie draft picks, so you can't really expect much from them either. I think Scavelli needs to find a way towards the middle of the year, perhaps, like I said, if things aren't going well, to maybe try to get some draft capital, try to retool a little bit, perhaps, if it's not working out. But I think right now, there's nothing really to trade, like you were saying, to make a big splash at this point, because the values just aren't quite there right now, but might be higher towards the middle of the season.
And if you're looking for capital, like, quick going into next year, like, I mean, Dustin's already got like half of the draft capital in the first round for next year. So like, who's trading a first round pick? Because Dustin's probably he's not going to be trading for a Barkley or Henry.
Unlikely.
I think unless his team really turns up like the first half of
It's
the year.
possible. Like that was the only thing I was thinking is like if the Elk get off to like a hot start, like similar to the Armadillos did last year, like he could be in the market, but I'm not banking on that. We'll put it that way. Like I'm not expecting that, and I do think right now I have Scavelli missing the playoffs. In my mind, with this current roster, I just don't think the running backs are going to be enough to keep it afloat. Which unfortunately, and I honestly can't remember the last time Scavelli missed the playoffs. I probably should look back at that, but I feel like he's been in the playoffs almost every year. So definitely a bit of a changing of the guard if that ends up happening with the cheese fries ascending. Other teams coming up. The long gamers obviously towards the top now. It's an interesting time in the league where there is quite a bit of muck, but I do feel like Scavelli's team unfortunately is kind of trending downwards. Overall, and I think James's lineup. I think he had 6 for the Battle Axes. I feel like I would take the under and shoot for like 5 is kind of what I was thinking. So.
I went way under. So I wasn't.
You should probably go to Dynabook then.
Apparently, I should be betting on Dynabook.
You might see some Dynabook bets later tonight, perhaps. So, but anywho, that's going to wrap it up here. We're an hour and 20 in, so that's a great discussion on a team that frankly needed the discussion. I don't think we don't want to see Scavelli's team in this state, but
we want everybody like coming back to the median like every year, like how the NFL pushes every team to 8-8 or 9-8, whatever. Like that's where you want to be, just because you want it competitive. So
you just got to get in the playoffs, man. Like that's all it is. Like get hot in the playoffs, and look, once again, I think there is a world where so a little retool could happen, and we could be right back there. But I'm not feeling it for this year quite yet. So all that to say is we will have another podcast soon. I believe the next team up is actually the Lambs on the Dynabook betting sheet. So we'll bring in probably another person for that one. And we'll do another team review here very soon. We got quite a few more to get through here. Hoping to try to get most of these in by kind of like the training camp time frame. So that way we can have some podcast episodes during training camp about like training camp news, how players are trajectories are looking as we get more news from camp, injuries, whatnot. So I feel like that's going to be a good time for the podcast as well.
Before we go, did you want to do a quick reaction on the trade from yesterday?
That's a great point, Sean. Actually, I did not think about that when I was building out this episode. So yeah, very interesting trade for the league. 2 teams that get, frankly, what they both needed. Scavelli definitely needed. Or I'm sorry, Tibbs definitely needed a tight end for his room. Hasn't really had one. I think he had Schultz the year he had a good year with the Cowboys, but really since then I think he's traded him away, and then he also traded away Laporta last year to Alex. So he kind of has traded away a couple of good options, but he gets a very good option here with Mark Andrews. Like you said, I think you have him in the top 5 on your rankings. And then he also gets the eternal handcuff, Isaiah Likely.
That's a great meme.
So I was thinking about that meme, and I was like, that episode is so funny because it's like Squidward doesn't want him there, and then he's just there, and he's like, "Hi, Squidward," because I initially thought about Bubble Buddy, him being Bubble Buddy, right? Because he's heard a lot too. Yeah. So I was like, all right, this could be funny. But anywho, all that to say, I think it was a great trade for both sides. Dan gets Jerome Ford, which is his handcuff, obviously, to Nick Chubb, and then Michael Pittman has been, like you said, a little bit of the league pass around, if you will. He's been on 4 teams, I think, or 5 teams now.
It's impressive. Like once everybody has Pittman on their team, how much they're willing to trade him away. It's crazy.
He just feels like the most like tradable asset ever, right? Like he's like. He's affordable, but he's also tradable. Like it's.
I've been offered Pittman multiple times in the last few years, and I'm like,
me too.
I don't want to.
Like I think he's a good player. I just don't think he's a great player, and that's fine. And I think he's a better real life player than he is fantasy player too.
I would agree.
I feel like he's in that wide receiver 20 something range, and that's fine. I think this year will be an interesting year for him too. With a fully healthy Richardson, and then actually some target competition maybe with Mitchell. and Downs.
Downs.
So it'll be interesting to see how that like plays out this year. For
Jelani
Pittman.
Woods.
Woods too is apparently on the come up. I don't know. Who knows if that actually happens or not, but I am certainly, I bet on it, so I think it's going to happen. I feel like the Colts should be a better offense this year, so we'll see. But I think the trade is good for both sides. So do you think anybody lost in this trade? I really don't think so.
I think it was relatively fair. Like I said, because I'm not a big Pittman guy, I probably would give the slight edge to Tibbs, but I think it makes sense for both people.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of the same boat. Like when you look at value perspective, I think, you know, like a very, very good borderline elite tight end, Mark Andrews, is like a hard thing to come by in this league. So if you can get him for basically a handcuff and like kind of a wide receiver 20-ish guy, that seems like a good trade to me.
Fucking tried.
He put in the effort.
It's probably why it took him so long to finish that trade.
He's putting the brakes on this whole thing.
A little bit.
All right. Well, that will wrap up this podcast. We will see you very soon. Thanks for tuning in if you tuned in live, and we will see you next time.